Some stories aren't loud. They don't scream for justice or revenge. They wait quietly, tucked behind decades of silence. Inside the small moments we carry like stones in our pockets. This is the story of a woman who built something extraordinary, only to be cast aside by the very system she gave her life to. But this isn't about revenge. It's about memory, about standing in the ruins of what was yours and choosing to leave with your dignity intact. If you believe in stories that honor truth, especially the truths that don't get celebrated, please take a moment to subscribe to their family stories. Your presence helps these voices be heard. They called it a restructuring. No warning, no thank you, just a name on an email thread that wasn't copied anymore. A badge that didn't scan. A calendar wiped clean. I had been with them for 23 years. 23. That's longer than some of those executives had been alive. And yet, on that rainy Thursday in October, I walked out of the building like a stranger. Security didn't look at me. My team didn't say goodbye. The machine had already replaced me. My name no longer lived in the code I wrote. I remember the walk to the parking garage more clearly than anything. The sound of my heels echoing against concrete. My car key trembling in my hand. I wasn't crying. Not yet. There's a strange calm that comes when you're completely gutted. Like your body decides to protect you from your own heart. It wasn't just a job. It was the system. I built it. From the first architecture diagram on a whiteboard in that cramped old office with the broken AC from the long nights rewriting code no one would touch. From scratch. From nothing, I built the bones they now pretended were born without me. And now, we've decided to transition to an AI-integrated platform. That's what they said. It can predict consumer behavior faster. With fewer overhead costs. We'll always value your contribution. Nora. My name sounded fake in their mouths. I got in the car and sat with the engine off. Silence. Rain ticking against the windshield. I didn't know where to go. I had nowhere to be, for the first time in 2 decades. Daniel, my husband, had passed 4 years ago. The boys were grown, married, living out of state. And now, the place that had anchored my days, the spreadsheets, the sprint planning, the database reviews, it was gone. I was untethered. I went home, heated up leftover soup, sat at the kitchen table where Daniel and I used to play cards after dinner. The bowl sat untouched. I stared at my hands. I think the hardest part wasn't that they replaced me. It was that no one fought it. No one said, wait, Nora built that. No one paused to ask if the system could run without the human being who gave it soul. They just let it happen. And the machine? It was good, efficient, cold. It didn't forget to log out of staging before merging to prod. It didn't have sick days or soft music playing in its headphones. It didn't tell interns, you're doing fine, just keep going. It didn't hold anyone's nervousness with care. It did the work. That was enough for them. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed that night, folding the sleeves of my old company sweatshirt, the one from the 10-year anniversary retreat. I thought about throwing it away. Instead, I put it in the bottom drawer. I don't know why, maybe to remember I was there. That it wasn't just a dream I had. The next morning, I woke up before the sun out of habit. Made coffee, checked my work email, still locked out, of course, but something in me wanted to see. As if this was all a misunderstanding. As if someone would call and say, we made a mistake, come back. No one did. And yet, I didn't feel like I'd lost. I felt like they had. They lost the version of that system that had a heart. That knew where to look when the metrics lied. That could sense the flaw no one else saw. They traded that for speed. For numbers. But I still had it. That knowing. That instinct. They couldn't take that from me. Not even the machine could. I didn't tell the boys right away. There was no need to worry them. What would I even say? Your mother's been replaced by a machine she helped build. They had their own lives, new babies, new homes, new promotions. I didn't want to be a burden circling their inbox. So I stayed quiet. That first week, I tried to keep a schedule. I woke at 6, made the bed, brewed my coffee, and pretended I had meetings to prepare for. I even opened a blank spreadsheet one morning. Stared at it like it owed me an apology. I filled a few cells, just to feel something familiar. Then I closed it and shut the laptop for 3 days. I thought about Daniel a lot during that time. Not in the way I used to, not with grief pressing on my chest. But like I was looking for him. As if he'd know what to say. He was the one who always told me I was more than the job. More than the screen. But even he would have understood what it meant. That place was my second skin. I built it line by line. Year after year. And now, even the interns I mentored wouldn't meet my eye in the grocery store. There was this one, Caleb. Young, bright, kind. The type who brought me coffee without asking how I liked it. But always got it right. I saw him by the freezer aisle one morning. Talking on his phone. When he spotted me, he looked down, pretended to compare frozen peas. I almost walked past. But I stopped. "Hi Caleb," I said, gently. "You don't have to hide. I'm not a ghost." He smiled, thin and nervous. "Hi Nora." I wasn't sure what to say. I nodded. "Most people aren't. It's okay." He said something then I'll never forget. "I just assumed, if they let you go, then none of us really matter." That hit me like a slow wave. I didn't answer, just patted his shoulder, left him standing there by the peas. But the words followed me out of the store, into the car, and all the way home. If they let you go, then none of us really matter. That's what it was. That creeping erosion. It wasn't just about me. It was about a message, quiet and cutting, that humans were now optional. That heart, care, intuition, those were luxuries. I made a decision that day. Not a loud one, just a steady, inward shift. I didn't want my name back on a door. But I wanted to leave something behind that couldn't be wiped from a server or replaced with an upgrade. I still had my notebooks. Dozens of them. Handwritten lines. Scribbled at all hours. Architecture diagrams. System flowcharts. Notes on behavior patterns, but more than that. Ideas. Questions. Things no machine could guess at. I started sorting them. Organizing. Naming patterns I'd only half seen before. What we'd built wasn't just software. It was behavioral intuition disguised as code. I didn't always know how I knew which customers would churn or which platform would fail. I just felt it. I thought maybe someone might want to know how. Not the company. They'd moved on. But maybe a young woman out there. Just getting started. Someone like me 20 years ago. Sitting in the back of a boardroom with her hand half raised. I could write. Not a manual. Not a memoir. But a record. Not for applause. For the ones coming next. And for the part of me that still needed to be seen, even if quietly. Even if late. I started writing at night. There was something about the quiet, the hush after the dishwasher stopped. The ticking of the baseboard heater, that made the memories more honest. I didn't try to be profound. I just wrote what I remembered, what broke, what worked, what I sensed before anyone else did. At first, it felt foolish. Who was I scribbling insights into an old notebook like some digital age monk? But slowly, my handwriting steadied. The gaps between thoughts shortened. And what came out wasn't just technical. It was personal, emotional. I began seeing what I'd given to that place, not just time, but tenderness. There were things I'd buried so long they had turned to stone. Like the first time my idea was credited to someone else. It was during a meeting on predictive modeling. I'd stayed late 3 nights refining the logic, tightening the data loops, and yet, when my manager, Miles, presented it the next day, he said, "Caleb's team put together a really sharp model." I was Caleb's team. I remember looking across the table. Caleb's eyes darted to mine. He knew, but he said nothing. None of them did. And I smiled. That soft, learned smile women give when they're swallowing something sharp. Later, Miles said, "You know how it is. Sometimes names just confuse people." It wasn't the first time. And I told myself it didn't matter, that the work spoke for itself. But I see now, it never did. Not unless someone else spoke it louder. And I was never loud. Not in that room. Not in that world. I was efficient, polite, precise, replaceable. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It came like erosion. A corner missed here. A mention skipped there. Until one day, I realized I was the ghost in my own building. The system still held my fingerprints. But no one asked who'd left them. I thought about the young women I'd mentored, especially Maya. She was sharp, saw patterns before they emerged, asked the questions no one wanted to answer. But when she challenged a senior dev in a sprint review, she was labeled difficult. I took her aside after the meeting and said, "Don't dull yourself down to fit. Just be too good to ignore." She laughed. "Like you?" I didn't answer. I didn't want her to see how tired I was. Now I wondered if I'd given her bad advice. If I should have told her to run while she still had the light in her. I wanted to reach out. I even drafted an email. Then I stared at the blinking cursor for an hour and never sent it. What would I say? They're building systems that don't need us anymore. And worse, they're erasing the stories of how those systems came to be. Of who made them. Of how much it cost. One night, I found an old photo, from the early days. There we were. 8 of us crammed into a windowless room. Pizza boxes on the floor. Whiteboards behind us full of sketches and dreams. I was the only woman. The only one still awake in that photo. Staring straight at the camera. Tired but alive. I didn't even remember the picture being taken. But I remembered how that moment felt. Like anything was possible. Like I mattered. That photo stayed on my desk. Not for nostalgia. But as proof. I had been there. I had built it. And no server purge could undo that. But the deeper I went into the notebooks, the more I realized something else. They weren't just ignoring the human side of the system. They were actively breaking it. There were blind spots in the AI model they'd implemented. Not theoretical, real ones. I saw it clearly in the way the new system weighed outliers. How it smoothed edges that shouldn't be smoothed. It missed signals I designed specifically to catch vulnerability. Quiet behaviors that hinted at user distress. Subtle flags for accessibility needs. The machine had deemed them statistically irrelevant. And no one was talking about it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. I didn't plan to speak. I only went to the conference because Maya had invited me. She was presenting her first keynote. I was proud of her. I wanted to sit in the back, clap quietly, and leave before anyone noticed me. But life doesn't always let you slip out the side door. The event was hosted at the same hotel we used for the original system rollout 10 years prior. Same carpet, same beige walls, but the banners now bore sleek slogans about efficiency and the future of intelligence. I scanned the faces milling around the lobby, most of them half my age. Badges swinging, eyes lit by ambition and caffeine. I found a seat in the back row of the breakout hall. Maya was already on stage, clicking through her slides. She was good, clear, focused, steady. Her presentation was on ethical model training. And in one of her last slides, she referenced an internal case study. My system, only now, it was listed under a new name. She didn't say mine, but she knew. When the session ended, the moderator opened the floor for Q&A. A few young men asked about model drift and bias correction. Then someone, I couldn't see who, asked, how did the original team handle data from vulnerable users? Any fail-safes? Maya hesitated, just a beat. Then she said, in the original design, there were embedded empathy flags. It's not part of the new model. A few people nodded, uninterested. But something in me rose, slow, aching, like breath after too long underwater. I stood up. I don't know why. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't wait for a mic. I just spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. I wrote those flags. I said, they weren't decorative. They were safeguards. For real people. The room turned. All eyes on me. I heard someone whisper my name. Maya's face softened, like she'd been holding her breath and could finally exhale. I'm Nora Green, I said, stepping closer to the stage. I built the first iteration of that system. I spent 7 years refining the behavioral thresholds, not just for efficiency, but for human care. We coded for hesitation, fatigue, withdrawal, signs people were struggling. Because we weren't just building tools. We were building trust. Silence. Not awkward. Reverent. The moderator, a man maybe 35, cleared his throat. Thank you, Ms. Green. Would you say those features were deprecated for technical reasons? Or, I looked at him, not unkindly. but with the quiet weight of someone who's seen too much to pretend. They were deprecated because care slows things down. I saw Maya close her laptop gently. Someone in the back started clapping. Then others joined. Not a standing ovation, but something better. Recognition. Afterward, in the hallway, people came up, shy, curious, respectful. A few young women asked for my contact. A developer from Boston said, "I always wondered why the empathy layer disappeared. We assumed it was never there." That night, Maya found me by the coffee station. "I didn't want to speak for you," she said. "I hoped you might one day speak for yourself." I looked at her, this brilliant, brave version of what I used to be, and felt something quiet loosen in my chest. "You left the door open," I said. That was enough. We sat for an hour in the lounge, trading stories, some bitter, some bright. She told me how often she had to argue for transparency, how data ethics was still an afterthought in most rooms. I told her I used to think silence was strength. It isn't. It's just what you settle for when no one listens. But now, someone had listened. And it wasn't enough to change the system. But it was enough to change the air. A week later, I got an email. Not from my old company. Not from a recruiter or a colleague. It was from a woman named Dr. Eliza Morrow, a professor at a small university upstate. Her subject line was simple. "You said what needed to be said." I almost deleted it. Thought it might be another polite nod with no weight behind it. But something made me open it. Her message was short. "Nora, I was in the room when you stood up. I've been teaching systems ethics for over a decade. And your name should be in every textbook. Would you consider coming to speak to my grad students? We need your story. With respect, Eliza." I read it twice. Then I stared at the screen like it was written in a language I no longer believed in. My story. Needed. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I had anything to give. I hadn't spoken in front of a classroom since I volunteered at my son's elementary school to explain what coding meant. But later that evening, I found myself printing the email. I slipped it into my notebook beside the photo of the early team, the one where I was the only one still awake. A few days later, I replied. The campus was quiet when I arrived, red brick buildings tucked beneath soft October trees. A wind had started to blow through the leaves. The kind that makes you feel like change is possible. Eliza met me at the door. She was warm, sharp, grounded, the kind of woman who didn't apologize for taking up space. I liked her instantly. She led me into a seminar room. Maybe 20 students. Diverse, alert, curious. They looked at me with something I hadn't felt in years. Respect. Not the kind you earn with credentials. The kind you earn with scars. I didn't use slides. I didn't have a speech. I just told the truth. About what it felt like to build something with your whole self. And then be erased from its story. About how the first thing that breaks in a broken system is the human behind it. About care, and how it gets trimmed, optimized, deleted, not because it doesn't matter, but because it's harder to measure. I told them the system still works. It just doesn't see people anymore. When I finished, no one moved. A few students had tears in their eyes. One of them, a young man with a nervous voice, raised his hand and asked, "Do you think it's too late to fix it?" I looked at him. At all of them. "No," I said, "but only if people like you stay human. Even when the code tells you not to be." After class, Eliza and I sat in her office. She poured tea like it was a ritual. Then handed me a folder. "What's this?" I asked. She smiled. "It's what you're going to teach next semester." I blinked. "What?" "A short course. Just 4 weeks. We'll call it Systems with a Soul. You don't need credentials. You are the credential." I sat there, stunned. I hadn't asked for this. Hadn't even dreamed it. "You don't owe them your silence anymore, Nora," she said. "You earned the right to be heard." And in that moment, sitting in a room full of books and soft light, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Chosen. Not used. Not borrowed. Chosen. I didn't know if I'd say yes. But I knew, for the first time, that I could. I said yes. Not out of anger. Not to prove a point. But because something in me had started to thaw. Some quiet part that had waited too long for permission. The course began in early spring. The trees on campus were still bare, but the air had softened, like it was learning to forgive the cold. I carried my old notebooks in a worn canvas bag, alongside a folder labeled Nora Green, adjunct faculty. The first time I stood in front of the class, I thought my voice would shake. It didn't. I told them what I knew, not just what I'd done, but what I'd felt. How systems grow like vines. They remember the shape of the hands that trained them. How every line of code carries intention. Even silence becomes a decision. The students weren't looking for answers. They were looking for someone to say the uncertainty was real. That intuition wasn't weakness. That empathy didn't belong only to therapists and poets. I gave them that. One day after class, a girl named Lena stayed behind. She reminded me of Maya. Years ago, sharp, restless, too smart for how softly she spoke. I keep feeling like I have to prove I belong, she said. I looked at her, really looked. You do, but not because you're unworthy. Because the world's still blind to what you carry. She swallowed hard. Do you think that'll ever change? I thought of Daniel's hands on mine the night before my first presentation. I thought of Caleb avoiding my eyes by the freezer aisle. I thought of that moment on stage, when I said my name out loud and the room finally heard it. It already is, I said. Later that week, I walked past the tech building and saw a poster for a panel, Human Bias in Machine Logic. My name was listed last, not in bold, not in caps, but it was there, and that was enough. I still didn't go back to the company. I heard through a former colleague that the new system had stumbled, a major oversight. Something about misclassifying users with speech delays. No public statement, of course. Just quiet restructuring. Again. They never reached out. Not once. And strangely, that became its own kind of peace. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to put my name on a plaque or footnote a white paper. The silence used to wound. Now it just confirmed what I already knew. They had lost something when they let me go. And I had found something. Not revenge. Not even vindication. But a return to the center of myself. The part that had always known. I wasn't the code. I was the soul beneath it. Some mornings I still wake early. The habit never quite left me. The quiet hours before the world stirs. They've always felt like mine. I make coffee, sit by the window, and let the light come slowly. I don't check emails first thing anymore. I don't measure my worth by calendar invites or task lists. There's no dashboard tracking me. No metrics deciding if I've added enough value by noon. And still, I exist. Some evenings, I walk the path near the woods behind the university. I carry nothing, just my breath, the soft rustle of leaves, and the sound of my own footsteps. Sometimes, students pass me, nodding. Sometimes stopping to talk. They know my name now. Not because it's printed on a door, but because I gave them something they could hold. Something that didn't run on code. Every so often, I'll get a message. A young developer from Singapore. A mother returning to tech after raising kids. A woman in her 60s learning Python, just to see what all the fuss is about. They write to say my story made them feel seen. That maybe they're not too late. That maybe they're not too small. I always reply. Not with advice. Just with presence. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing we can offer isn't wisdom. It's the quiet reassurance that we survived. That we kept our softness. That we refused to let the world turn us to steel. I've started calling my notebooks field journals now. I keep writing in them. Even though no one's asking for them. I write about design. About human signals. About the slow drift between efficiency and empathy. I don't know if they'll ever be published. But that's not the point. They're not for profit. They're for memory. The memory of a woman who wasn't erased. Who stayed. Who told the truth, even when the room didn't clap. And if anyone ever asks me now, how did it feel? Being replaced by a machine? I'll say, they didn't replace me. They just walked away from what they didn't know how to value. But I never stopped being real. I never stopped mattering. And neither will you. If this story found you at the right moment, please consider subscribing to Their Family Stories. Because the quiet truths, the ones no machine can tell, still deserve to be heard.